If you're law enforcement, stop and listen to me right now. If you're a police department that does not have an LPR system, Insight is offering the first 10 agencies, that means one agency apiece, gets one camera for free. You have to tell them that Two Cops, One Donut sent you. You heard me right. If you're a police agency that does not have an LPR system yet, or does have an LPR system, and you're not happy with the product you have, Insight is offering you a free camera. No strings attached, and they will install it. I have 10 to give out. Tell them Two Cops, One Donut sent you, or reach out to me, and I will get you in contact. If you're a business owner or an HOA, please stop and listen to me right now. If you're just listening to the audio, do yourself a favor and watch the YouTube version of this episode to get a visual of what I'm about to tell you. I want to tell you guys about Insight LPR. It's a license plate reader. If your agency, community, or business is looking to invest in LPR to help solve and deter crime or to make your community safer, Insight LPR has my vote of confidence. I've met with their team. They know their LPRs, guys. They're the real deal. They bring over 75 years of collective experience to building LPR cameras and the software that supports communities across the country. The other thing I really like about this team is how much they listen to law enforcement. They understand the importance of working together with law enforcement and getting their input as they build and innovate products and their service to match the needs of law enforcement. In other words, when I complain or have suggestions to make their damn camera better, they actually do it. The Insight LPR team is extremely passionate and takes pride in their product development, which makes their cameras some of the most durable cameras in the market. For the gear nerds out there, what that means is this stuff's made of military grade aluminum and is nitrogen purged, whatever that means. This design makes the cameras rugged and able to withstand harsh weather elements. Here's the big selling point for me. Their nighttime scan accuracy is higher than most of the leading competitors. In my opinion, this is what sets them apart. As we know, the majority of crimes occur at night, so it's critical to have high scan accuracy at night. Insight's cameras check the box with the nighttime plate read accuracy greater than 96%. 96%, guys. That's pretty freaking high. If your community is looking to invest in LPR technology, reach out to one of their experts today, or reach out to me. Tell them Two Cops, One Donut sent you. Coming up next on Two Cops, One Donut.
LAPD, the city in general, the politics became so enmeshed in the culture of the police department. Working for a city that didn't support you, for a city council that didn't support you, for a governor that didn't support you, and then having your own command staff and admin not supporting you. It, for me, became an environment where I felt like I was no longer effective in my job. Pretty much everything was being decriminalized. Um, Nothing was getting prosecuted. You make these arrests, you take someone to jail. It's a revolving door. They're out the back door before you even get back in your patrol car. Like, it was to such an extent that I felt like I wasn't making a difference anymore.
All right, welcome back to Cops One Donut. I am your host, Eric Levine, and today I've got with me Tara Munjekovich. I don't know if I said that right.
Close enough, Munjekovich.
Munjekovich.
It's very
Okay.
phonetic.
Yes, and she is a former LAPD. So we had a very chance meeting at a Black Rifle Coffee Company in Texas. I think, what was that, North Richland Hills?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know why. I don't even know why we were out there. Something. My team was. We were working a op somewhere out that direction, and we decided to take advantage of Black Rifle Coffee being right there, and then happened to run into Tara, and I'm a talker, so I talked to everybody, and I think she came up and was just thanking us for our service or something like that.
It actually started when your coworker came up and asked me to take a photograph of you guys. And I made a
Oh,
Yeah, and I made a comment to her like, none of you wanted to take the picture, and I said, just deal with it. Like, you're gonna want these memories later in life.
the one girl on the team, she wanted the
Yes,
picture. I was like,
always.
okay, I'll do a picture. I needed the coffee first. That was the problem.
But you know what? I have an album that I put together of my law enforcement career, and it's pretty special. So I totally understood where she was coming from, and I was like, yeah, I will absolutely take your picture.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, let's get into it. All right. First off, Tara, I kind of briefly told you in our chance meeting of what the podcast was and what we do, and it's a, you know, kind of a bridging of the gap between us and the community. Police officers most of the time don't get to speak on their own behalf. You don't get to hear their voice. But it isn't just cops; it's firefighters and prosecutors and mayors and all these different people. You never get to sit down and have an actual conversation, like without some sort of political agenda or the First Amendment issues because you're a cop and you can't really truly say everything. So understanding that, I was like, well, let me try to do an education portion. That's one thing that all cops can talk about freely, and I can do that by mixing in a humanization factor, and then and having the tough discussions about the things we think we're doing right, things we're doing wrong, and how we can fix them. So I do that through this podcast without having any interference, so to speak. So with that said, now you're a chick cop. That's
Yes,
you're in the minority already. So
yes, or
in
was
that,
anyway.
you were. So in
I
that,
was.
besides being born in the wrong state of California, well, I don't know if you were born there, but
I
work
was. I was born there.
working in California, what was your upbringing like? Where were you born? What would you like to do in school, and what led you to a career of being a first responder?
Well, I was born and raised in Southern California, and law enforcement did not run in my family. I don't have any family who are cops, um, firefighters, anything.
Really?
And no, not at all. And I was very artistic growing up as a kid. I was the indoor girl who didn't participate in sports, completely uncoordinated. And anything, any type of athletic job was like the furthest thing from my mind. And my goal was kind of just finish college and then get out into the working world. And I started working at Disney right out of college. And I was in an executive office and I was working for one of the top executives in the company. And it was a good job for being in my early 20s out of school, but it was kind of a soul sucking career. I felt like I didn't have a purpose. I wasn't really doing anything that I felt proud of. And one day, an opportunity came up to join this program. It was a program for basically emergency preparedness. So in the event of an earthquake or fire or something of that nature, employees were part of this group that would help get other employees out of the building and make sure everyone was accounted for. So kind of like a little mini emergency management program. And part of that program involved an opportunity to take a class on how to use a fire extinguisher. And so I thought, oh, that's cool. I'm going to take that. And the class was taught by the Disney Fire Department. And I didn't even know Disney had a fire department. And I took that class, and it was kind of like a, wow, this is cool. I think I want to do this moment. So I decided I wanted to be a firefighter. And I put myself through the fire academy, got my EMT. I started volunteering at Disney as a firefighter. Within a year, I got hired, and I was there like firefighter and fire prevention officer there. I did that for a couple years. I also went back. I started teaching at the fire academy. Like my life, all I wanted to do was the fire service. And I was at a point where I worked my way up through the ranks to captain. This is over a span of 10 years. And I was the fire marshal for like 50 some odd properties with Disney Studios. And I was teaching in the fire academy. I was teaching in the fire technology program at the local community college. And my life was just 24/7 fire. When I had gone through the fire academy, it was a weekend program. So it was 7 days a week for 2 years that's all I did. And I'm short. I'm a 5'3", small female. At the time, I weighed 112 pounds sopping wet. And a small female in the fire service was very challenging for me. I struggled a lot, especially with ladders. Like my cardio was great. I could run hoses all day long, but my height was a huge disadvantage for me. And it was a career field that I like busted my butt to do my best. And I just was in a position where some things were just really hard for me. And one of the things I did though, because this was the career that I wanted for the rest of my life. And I ended up getting my master's degree in emergency services administration. And I was kind of at that point where I was struggling with the I love-hate relationship um, in the fire service. And when I was in my master's program, it was a very specific and small program. There were maybe in there. And there were 3 cops in the program, and the rest was all fire service personnel. And it was primarily, captain and above that were in this program. But on the cop side, there was 1 motor cop and there were 2 sergeants in the course. And as time went on, I decided that they were doing really interesting things. Like we would have to do, projects and reports, and the things that they were doing them on were very appealing to me. And I think because I was in that position where I was having that love-hate struggle with the fire service, I'm one of those people that just likes to take risks and do challenging things. So I kind of got a hair up my butt and I said, I think I'm going to try law enforcement. Like I had a great job, but I think I want to do something a little different. And all 3 of the cops in there were from LAPD. And one of them kept, come to the dark side, come to the dark side. And so I said, okay, you know what? Screw it. I knew that if I went to the academy and it didn't work out, I had a year to go back to my fire service job. And at this point, I was actually working for a municipal fire department as a fire inspector. So I was still working at Disney, training their firefighters, but my full time job at that time was working for a small municipal department. So compared to the fire academy, the police academy was a breeze for me because, in terms of like the physical aspects, it wasn't nearly as difficult as the fire service was. And the only department that I applied to was LAPD because I decided if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this for one of the best departments in the world. And that's really what I thought about LAPD. It's an incredible department. And so I graduated from the academy, said goodbye to my fire service career, and then I started down the path of law enforcement. And it did have its challenges for me, absolutely. Even though I was physically in good shape for my fire service career, I was doing things I'd never shot a gun before. I The mindset is very different the way you approach things in law enforcement than in the fire service. And I kind of had to rewire my brain to, focus on learning for this career field. And it was probably just like for me such an interesting experience because it was something that was not in my background and it was something that I didn't have a natural ability towards. And being my size, yes, I struggled in a lot of things, especially climbing walls in the academy and doing some of the physical feats that were just being a small female were very challenging. But I had that focus and determination. And my thought was, if I'm going to be in this career field, I'm going to be the best at what I do. And I never allowed myself to make excuses for why I couldn't do something. And I was with LAPD for 11 and a half years, and then I transitioned to another department, but we'll get to that here shortly.
Okay.
But in my LAPD career, I had some incredibly amazing assignments. I had an awesome career. I did things that I never thought I would ever do, and I just had amazing opportunities.
Okay. Well, let's go back because I didn't want to stop. You were on a roll, girl. So I was like, I'm just gonna let her keep going. So some of the things I want to touch on is one, how does an introverted style person, is what it sounds like, with
Mhm.
no athletic ability, get into 2 of the most dynamic career fields known to man when it comes to action and adventure?
I've always had this desire to go against the grain of what's natural for me. And, like I said, I was a very indoor girl. I wrote stories and made paper dolls and sewed clothes for my dog. I grew up in a neighborhood where I didn't have very many friends. There were no kids my age, and I was very introverted. I was basically an only child and didn't have a lot of friends. And when I worked at Disney in like the corporate side, there was just something about it that didn't appeal to me. I was making really good money at a very young age and working for, like I said, one of the top level executives in the company. But I didn't feel like I was making a difference. And I've always had this desire to do something that has a positive impact on other people. And that fire extinguisher class was just like a light bulb moment for me of, oh wow, I never even looked at a career field like this as an option.
Hmm.
And so stepping into that challenge of like the fire academy kicked my butt. Like I said, I was not athletic. I can't You could throw me keys and I won't catch them. Like my hand-eye coordination is awful. I Team sports, I was quite literally the one who made goals for the opposite team like you see in the movies. Like I
Yeah.
actually did that. That was me. And I went to a private school for some time where it was a very small school and you were on all the sports teams. So if you looked at the yearbook, I was on the volleyball team and the basketball team. I never played a single game. I sat on the bench the whole time. I was there for the team picture because I was the one that you would put in last as the sacrificial lamb. And that was basically it.
Okay. So in this career field, one of the things that's hard for us to do is we always attract the same people. We attract the alphas. I mean, that's
Yes.
really kind of the mindset that
Mhm.
people they're outgoing, extroverted, know how to talk to people, or are comfortable talking with people. Doesn't mean they know how to talk to people. Um, I want to get in this type of career field. I like the diversity. I like getting people like you because they always seem to be a welcome surprise, and bring something different to the table other than the norm that we're used to. So if you're going to try to recruit the introverts out there, the female introverts even, like
Mhm.
what were the obstacles for you? How was your social skills when you first started with this? Was it something you already had some social skills, you just happened to be an introverted person? How did that work for you?
I did have social skills. I will say that, but I was introverted. And on top of that, the fact that I was not an athletic person, I did not have a lot of self confidence going into this career field. And when I went into the fire academy, particularly, I was one of four females in the academy. And it was initially, I did not pass the academy. There I passed everything. Academically, I'm a superstar. Like that's my forte. I
Yeah.
am a book nerd. I am a creative writer. My writing skills are outstanding for this career field.
Was it the firefighter one you didn't pass or the
It was
LAPD?
no, it was firefighter academy I didn't
Okay.
pass. And that but that's kind of where I developed the skills that got me to where I am. So,
What was that like? Good, not passing the first time. I know a lot of people just they don't make it. They're like, I'm done.
well, it was twofold. It was devastating for me personally, and it was embarrassing because I was also the class president. I was academically at the top of my class. I was at our graduation giving a speech for our graduating class when I hadn't graduated the academy myself. Like, that's a very difficult thing to do. And I basically had to, like, pull your pants up and be a big girl and go out there and just do your best. And I told myself, you had a year after the academy was over to complete the final physical agility test and actually get your certification. I went to a program where I drove an hour and a half away twice a week in the evenings after work so that I could practice. It was ladders. I failed on ladders. Like
Okay.
it was one specific skill of taking a ladder off the side of the rig, and the ladder was well above my shoulder. So for me, I couldn't I had no leverage to do it. I had to come up with some weird way of taking one end of the ladder off and then balancing it and walking down and taking the other end of the ladder off. And it was a whole balance thing that I was able to do it, but it was trying to figure out how to do it within the time constraints of the exam. And I worked on that for 6 months until I could do it and finally pass. And that, I think, was for me, was just I had this determination that I put a year into this academy. I I am not one who fails. Like I refuse to accept failure and I refuse to make excuses. So if I can't do something, I'm going to learn how to do it. And when I was younger, I was in a program that basically taught me public speaking. So interacting with people was not the issue for me. My problem was my lack of self esteem in my abilities to perform well in the job. And when I became a cop, it was even more so because, LAPD is a very traditional department. And I didn't want to just be an everyday street cop. Like there were things I wanted to do. And I ended up working some assignments where it was incredibly challenging for me to get those positions and then to maintain those positions.
Hey folks, Eric Levine from Two Cops, One Donut. Want something better than Ring, Arlo, Brink, or any of the other quick launch home security systems? I've been having trouble with my Ring products. They don't read license plates on moving vehicles, the link doesn't connect fast enough to my phone, and I'm tired of getting notifications only to see like a glimpse of something that set it off. I was reached by a veteran-owned business called Agent Security. The owner, the staff, all veterans or former cops, they're kind of like the Chick-fil-A of customer service when it comes to security. They have a system that does everything companies like Ring do and more. They have pivoting cameras that track day or night. They can also read license plates and catch high-definition details that will lead police more effectively to catching the offender. Their mission is providing the best home security systems to their customers. All you have to do is start the conversation to protect our most valuable assets, our families. They listen to your needs and come up with perfect customized security solutions to protect what matters to you most. You can contact them by phone at 713-962-3558 or email info@agentsecurity.com or visit their website, agentsecurity.com. That's AGENTSECURITY.com. They serve the greater Houston area, North Texas, and more. Be sure to tell them that Eric Levine from Two Cops, One Donut sent you. So let me ask you this, because I've seen this in my career. You get guys and girls that can't perform
Mhm.
certain physical aspects like that. That happens all the time.
Yes.
And I've noticed in my career that sometimes special exceptions are given to females because there's not enough of them in the career field, and they give them the extra time to to go after these things. And there's some people that bitch about it, some people that don't give a shit either way. I kind of look at the big picture of things. Like we're talking about an exception to one specific physical skill. Like in your case, it's not your fault that you were born a tiny little person. Does that mean you can't do all the rest of the job? Because I know some guys that got through the academy that can't do almost any of the physical things that was required to get in. And that pisses me off more because you are going to be the hungry one that goes on to get it. So the point I'm getting to, did they make any exceptions because you were a girl to allow you to take the time that was needed to get to the passing point that they wouldn't have done for a guy, do you think?
So in LAPD, yes, not for me specifically, but I'm going to relate an example. But before I get to that, when I was in the fire academy, that was one of the things I had so much respect for was the fact that they did not let me pass, that they did not let me slide. Like I said, I was the class president. I excelled in everything except that one skill.
Mm-hmm.
Could they have let me slide on that skill? Probably, but they didn't. And I respect the fact that they didn't. And it forced me to push myself to achieve the things that I wanted to do. And so, even though I did end up graduating and I was able to perform that skill, I thought about it later and was I proud of myself for completing it? Yes. But at the same time, I've always understood the other side of the issue. Like for example, if I'm on a crew with a bunch of guys who are capable of doing their job, but I need help doing my part of the job. Is that fair for the rest of the crew? I don't think it is. Like that's my personal belief is that if I can't if one person should be able to take a ladder off the rig in a timely manner and get it over to the building to go help someone else is pulling hose or doing something else. And that's my assigned skill. And I can't do that without help from somebody else. That messes up the rest of the team. And it does hold people back and it can turn into a dangerous situation. So, no, I don't think it's right. And when I was in my LAPD career, one of the units that I worked is called Metropolitan Division, and it was the elite unit of the department. It's where you have SWAT, K9, the mounted police, and then they have these components called line platoons. And it's basically, when I started, there were two different line platoons, and it's 20 to 40 officers in each platoon, and you have specialized skills. You're basically like a mini SWAT team, to put it in perspective. And in order to get to even apply to be a part of these units, you have to have already been a training officer. You have to have had a certain amount of time on the job, and you have to pass a physical agility test. And I don't know what it's like in, but with LAPD in general, once you pass your physical in the academy, you're never tested on anything again. There's no annual PT test. There's no nothing. So you could essentially live out the rest of your career never doing another physical test, with the exception of, going in a foot pursuit and testing your own physical agility. But in order to be in this unit, I trained for a year because running has always been my absolute worst thing. Like, I will do pull-ups and push-ups all day, but I hate running. Like,
Well,
running is just
your legs
not
are
my thing.
it takes
Yes,
20 more steps for you to get to my two. So
exactly.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. So like running has always been like, oh, the worst thing for me. And to complete this test, it was a timed run. It was a minimum of, I believe it was 40 or 50 push-ups, 80 sit-ups, and like 5 pull-ups or something like that. And when I initially took the test, the whole department is competing. Anyone is open to take the test.
And we're talking about that specialized unit or at
Yes,
SWAT.
this specialized unit, of which
Okay.
SWAT is this. Now, the SWAT test is its own thing.
I was going to
But
say, I think that's a
yes,
separate.
oh yes, but before you can even get into SWAT, you have to be a member of Metropolitan Division. At least that's how it used to be. And so in order to even get anywhere near SWAT, you had to pass this other level of physical agility test. And when I took it, I was the only female who took it that passed. And like, again, I worked my butt off to pass this
How
test, and
many
I
did you go
trained
against, you think?
hundreds. Of
Woo!
women, I would say maybe there were 20 or 30,
Oh,
but
okay.
out
But
of
still,
hundreds, yeah, out of hundreds of applicants, and you also had to have a certain shooting score. They had different shooting tests. There was like a bonus test and then the standard shooting test. And that's something else I trained for months and months and months, and I went 4 or 5 times a week shooting to get myself at a level of proficiency to pass
because
this
nothing's a
test.
surprise. You guys know the
Right.
standards before you even get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I worked my butt off to get into this unit, and it was a very male dominated unit. There were there was
It's,
one other female
it's a
who
male
had been.
dominated career.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And but this unit in particular, it was like the testosterone was just, I mean, because
Yeah.
we're LAPD Metro, we're the best of the best, you
Yeah.
know? And the two platoons at the time, there was an A platoon and a B platoon. And I was one of two females in the platoon that I was in. And the other one, she'd been there for years. And I'm one of those people that I am very supportive of other females on the job.
Yeah.
And I like, if you are cut out to do the job, I will help you 100% to get there.
It's an uphill climb for y'all.
Yes. And
It is.
I was working with a female who was not like that at all. And it was very unwelcoming. And it was a very disheartening experience for me because I worked so hard to get into this unit, and then I was treated like crap by everybody pretty much. And it was kind of like, oh, that's your rite of passage. Like, no one's going to talk to you for 6 months, in this unit. So just suck it up. That's how it
Yeah.
is.
They try to
Like,
treat
okay. Well,
that's an old military tradition.
yes. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
So about 6 months later, the department decided to do an expansion, and they wanted to build up Metropolitan Division, and they opened up two more platoons and they hired 200 more officers. Well, in doing so, there was a push for females. And there was several females hired who did not actually pass the test. And
Oh,
they allowed them to pass the test. And that is where I have a problem with it. I trained to a certain standard to be able to make it into this program. And then it was like, we're going to bypass that and just open the doors. And if you can't do any pull ups, that's okay. At least you tried. You eked out 38 push ups, kind of, sort of, or just going to let it slide. That was very frustrating for me because
you're choosing
they,
perception over standards.
yes.
And the standards are there for a reason. I try to push this on people. The reason the standards were created was because the job showed a need for it at some point. When they're like,
Mhm,
hey, we got to create this position. Okay, what's the common shit we have to do? Well, we do this, we do that, we do this. All right, let's put that into our standards of getting into the unit so something can complement the way the job actually goes. And then when
yes.
they get there, I think that those units, they stand for a long time, like SWAT, for instance.
Mhm,
They're there for a long time. And then people start to notice, they're like, man, there's never any women in these units. Why is that? Well, because the jobs demand these certain things, and
mhm,
it there are certain physical limitations for females. Like maybe not even a limitation as much as just it takes a lot more for them to get to that same level as it does a male, and
mhm.
it's nobody's fault. It's just genetics, I guess. I don't know.
Yes.
I'm not a learning doctor, but these standards are there for a reason. And then when we start allowing public perception to interject onto a job that life and death is on the line, because like you said, you're not a patrol unit. Your
Right.
your community policing is pretty much gone to the wayside when you start going to
Mhm.
those units, because they're there to kick ass, take names. That's what they're
Exactly.
designed for. So now you're pushing politics into a substandard way of hiring for jobs. Somebody's going to get hurt, or you're going to put
Yes.
an idiot in there that doesn't belong in there, and somebody else is going to get hurt. A public community member is going to get hurt.
Yes. And it was, and that's exactly what started happening with the unit. You not only were you getting people in there who, like, the females who physically weren't capable, but you were bringing in people. They lowered the standard of, you don't have to be a training officer first to get into this unit. Um, Technically, they call it a P3. It's like a police officer 3, which is a training officer position.
Okay.
And prior to when they made all these changes, you had to work out in the field as a training officer before you could even apply. Well, they changed that standard so they were hiring in as that P3 position. So you had people that had 3, 4 years on the job that were coming into this unit with minimal experience as a cop, period. And now you're putting them in a self directed unit where they're supposed to go out and do crime suppression, like basically on your own. And here we're sending you to XYZ area of the city, go crush this particular problem. And then 2 days later, you're sent somewhere else. And you're dealing with very, very young cops who were very cocky about being in this unit that really had no business being there because they didn't put in the work and the effort and the time to build themselves as police officers before going into this unit. And that's where it became an issue for me.
Yeah, it's one thing. Now there are some, and this is very few, but there are some officers in their 4 years of police work. They've put in 8 years of time,
Yes.
but everybody knows that guy or that
Hmm.
girl. Everybody knows
Yes.
them, and they're like, well, we understand. You're letting Smith in because Smith fucking worked on the east side, and he's made 900 arrests, and he's infiltrated several drug deals and whatever it is. But
Right.
that's few and far between. But when you do start putting that 3 4 year officer, there's a reason we call them rookies. We call people
Yes.
rookies until they hit that 5 year mark. That's about the golden hour for a lot of people, and they're like, all right, you know how to patrol. That
Right.
still
Exactly.
doesn't mean you know how to do the specialty stuff and whatnot. You know
And
how to patrol.
LAPD is a huge department. You
That
can go from one
Yeah.
division of the city that is like, working in Beverly Hills where there's no crime, and you can go to the south end of working in, the complete ghetto, and your 1 year of experience in the ghetto is 10 times more profound than the 10 years of the person who worked a cush job in the valley.
Yeah.
So it also depends on where you came from in the department.
Do they push rookies out to those sides of town, or do you automatically go to the hard
When
knock
I
area?
when I went through the academy, and I think it's the same way, you get to write down your top 3 picks of where you wanna go, but in all reality, it depends where the need is in the community. So it depends where they need officers, like, I think I ended up getting my 2nd pick when it was my turn,
Mm-hmm.
but I know so many cops who listed their 3 and they ended up somewhere completely different, so
Yeah.
it's just kind of the luck of the draw.
How many officers are on LAPD? You know?
Technically over 10,000,
Okay.
um, but there are I don't know what it's at now, to be honest with you, because I know a lot of officers left in the last couple of years, and there are within that 10,000, it's not saying there's 10,000 on the street. You know, a lot of those are office jobs and desk jobs. So 10,000 officers is not reflective of that many being out in the field.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know like New York's at 42,000 ish, somewhere
Yeah.
between that 46. I think that's insane. I knew LAPD. I think you guys are the second largest, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gigantic. Okay, so you get in there, you get into this field, and then they split up or they expand,
Mhm.
and you're in there now. You're starting to get disgruntled. So what happened after that?
Well, the expansion was actually a benefit to me because they also expanded the mounted unit, and that's our the equine unit. And it was never anything that I was interested in. And we were standing down for the Special Olympics at one point when I was in this unit. And we were standing down at the barn. And I said, I didn't like, I've been with the department at this point for 9, 10 years. I didn't know we had a barn. And the next thing I know, I'm at the mounted platoon. And because of that expansion, they were opening up 6 spots in mounted. And someone said, "Oh, you ought to apply." And I was like, I don't really have any experience riding a horse other than summer camp when I was 10 years old. And one of the guys was like, "Here, get on this horse. Let's just like go around the arena." It was one of those like I fell in love situations of like, "Oh my god, this is what I want to do." So I applied to the mounted platoon. I got selected as one of the I think there were 10 of us that went through the mounted academy. And that was a couple months of just learning how to ride, and not just learning how to ride, but learning how to ride and how to do crowd control and all the things that mounted police do. And it was something very new to me. And it was aside from working Vice, which I absolutely loved, and I did that for 4 years. This was like the height of my LAPD career was working the mounted unit.
Really?
Oh, yes. I like at first it was embarrassing to me. I'm like walking around with boots and spurs and a cowboy hat, and I was so self-conscious, like I feel like a
What?
fraud.
Oh
Yeah. Yeah.
man, come to Texas,
And
girl.
right, well, that's the thing, like, in Los Angeles, you don't see that,
Yeah.
and I didn't grow up with that, so, you know, you're walking through the police station, and your spurs are clinking on the ground, and everyone knows the mounted unit's there, and it was, like, such a weird self-conscious moment for me.
And for you, they're
But
looking around. Where's that noise coming? Like,
yes.
oh, there she
Yeah.
is.
But it was the coolest thing because I don't know what it's like here. Do you guys have a mounted unit?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yes,
that
ma'am.
that wasn't really a thing where I came from, and especially like the only units I was familiar with were like New York and Chicago, where they patrol the parks and they're in their helmets and their almost like their bike boots and the pants. And no, this was straight cowboy. Like you're in cowboy boots, spurs, cowboy hat, polyester pants so that they're stretchy to get up
Mm-hmm.
and down your horse, and then your regular uniform shirt. And I I got to do the most incredible things, like riding a horse in the middle of downtown LA traffic.
Yeah.
I mean, like, who does that? I didn't even know that was a thing. So for me, it was like, wow, I am at the pinnacle, like, dream point of my career. And my intention was just to, like, ride that out to retirement. That's like all
Literally.
I do. Yes,
Literally
literally
right
ride.
Sorry, dad jokes.
Yes. And then on top of that, like buy my horse for $1 from the city when I retired.
It's funny you say that. I took my daughter to Montana this summer, and we did basically a riding excursion. We stayed at the Bar W Ranch in Montana. I think it's off of Kalispell, but we rode for 6 days straight. But one of the horses there was a retired LAPD horse.
Okay.
Still had the
Oh,
brand on it and everything. Yep,
that's awesome.
yep. I think the officer that purchased that horse, he had to give the horse up, like he got injured or something. He couldn't ride anymore, and he
Okay.
wanted the horse to have a good retirement, I guess, and sent him up to the mountains.
That's awesome.
But they take
Yeah.
great care of the horses out there. So
Oh, well, so does LAPD. Like those horses are so spoiled. And that was always one of the things for me with interacting with the public. You
you
have that.
have to be. You guys got PETA out there.
Yes, and that's what I was gonna say. Like maybe here people are respond differently, but we would get so many people angry that, it's animal abuse to be riding these horses out in the field. And I'm like, you have no idea how spoiled these horses are. They're
Yeah.
out here for 4 hours a day tops. They get the best feed, they have the best medical care, they live in this luxury barn. Like they're spoiled, trust me.
Yeah. Yeah. I this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Impact Tactical. Impact is a tactical outfitter for the men and women of our military, police, fire departments, and other public safety around the country. Impact's core beliefs is that fearless men and women protect our freedom and safety should have access to the best tactical performance apparel, equipment, and tools on the market, and they shouldn't have to go broke to get it. I've used Impact for about 11 years, and I can attest that they do live up to their core values. So you get a personal recommendation from me. You can find them at impacttactical.com. That's MPAK tactical.com. And be sure to tell them that 2 Cops, 1 Donut sent you. I've considered doing mounted. I think I will wait until I make Sarge. If I make Sarge, maybe that'll be someplace I go. Because I plan on doing, I'll be sergeant for 3-4 years. And
Yeah.
that'd be a good place to go. I've saved all my specialty units for when I make sergeant, because I've had a lot of fun as a patrolman, and I'm still kind of running and gunning out there in the streets as a corporal / detective. But
Nice.
yeah, it's a cool unit. Mounted is a cool unit, especially out where I'm at. So yeah, definitely. I like I said, I knew LAPD had a mounted unit. I just wasn't sure if you guys were actually doing enforcement or if you guys were a PR.
Well, when I started, it was enforcement, and now it has turned into basically a PR, community policing, don't do any enforcement. And a lot of that has to do with why I ended up leaving and that transition from doing enforcement to doing nothing.
So what was you did this career? You said you did Vice?
I did. I did Vice for 4
Let's
years.
talk about that for a second, in case there's any up and coming women that want to be in law enforcement and they think Vice may be something they wanted to get into. How did you get into Vice? What was the requirements first?
So when I finished probation, I was sent to a division that I really wanted to work in. And it was a high gang area. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work gangs. I had no interest in vice. And I was in this division where they had just had several very high profile gang shootings. And I was like, so happy to be there. Like, this is what I want to do. And there's movement all the time. There's 21 divisions within LAPD. And so they move officers around based on needs of other divisions. And I had been there for maybe 3 months, and they were starting a new unit in Hollywood. And it was a, a high visibility unit on Hollywood Boulevard because they were having an issue with South End gangsters coming up to Hollywood on the weekends, partying in the clubs, and then getting in shootings on Hollywood Boulevard and creating, mass chaos and traffic hazards and like just nuts going on in the street. So they started this new unit, and it was like a footbeat unit that was patrolling Hollywood Boulevard. And they needed off like 20 some odd officers for this unit. And it's kind of like a, I don't know how they do it, but it was like a first in, last, or last in, first out. And so I was one of the last people that transferred to that division I wanted to be in, and nobody voluntarily wanted to leave. So it was like, okay, sorry, you're being sent to Hollywood and you're going to go work this footbeat unit. And I was very resistant to it because I just wanted to do patrol in Northeast Division. It was probably the best thing that ever happened to me because I pretty much transitioned from my year of probation, a few years working patrol, and then I was immediately sent to this specialized unit. And it started out as a footbeat unit. And then in winter, it turned to like you were in cars. And it was pretty much go out, talk to everybody, make the most insignificant minor arrests, because it was using that theory, like the broken windows theory kind of thing, where we're going to take people in for minor offenses to clean up Hollywood Boulevard and make it a safe place for tourists and people coming to, party on the weekends, and try to get rid of this element that's starting to really take over the boulevard. And I did that for about a year. And one of the sergeants who was running that unit, within Hollywood Division, I don't know if you're familiar with Hollywood, but it's, Hollywood, California. It's like the mecca of what everyone thinks is like movie star land, and prostitution is a big thing there. So the
Well,
Vice unit,
duh. Everybody knows the
right?
movie,
Exactly.
right?
So the Vice unit there is one of the larger Vice units within the city, and they have the undercover Vice officers, and then they have like a supportive part of the unit called Prostitution Enforcement Detail, and that's the uniformed element of the Vice unit. And they were going to hire a few more officers. So my sergeant at the time, he saw that I was really putting in the work, and that I loved going out there and just like making shit happen. And he said, "Hey, I want to recommend you for this unit." And I said, "I don't want to work that. Like, that doesn't sound fun to me." And he said, "No, I really think you'd like it. Like, just trust me. Like, go for it."
In the
And I said,
uniformed aspect?
"The uniform aspect, yes." And I
Okay.
was like, "Okay." So I put in for it. I got accepted to that. I did that for about a year. And what it basically was whenever the Vice guys would go out, you would be like their chase car. And you'd end up, taking the prostitutes back to the station, doing all the paperwork and the admin.
Can you
And
kind of
then,
explain what the vice guys, the undercover guys are doing? Like, how does that go down for them?
so the undercover guys, they're all in plain clothes, they're all in plain vehicles, and they basically go out in their cars and they try to pick up prostitutes. Or we did a lot of online stings as well, where you would, find somebody online and then you'd arrange to meet at a certain hotel or something like that. And then once there was no actual act of any contact, sexual contact taking place. It was just this agreement of an exchange of money or services for some kind of prostitution act.
I would be
And
so bad at trying to pick up a prostitute. So I'd be like, would you like to have sexual intercourse for money?
right?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
there's so many, and there's so many rules. It's like you can't throw out, you have to have them ask you. Like, you can't say, "Hey, do you want to have sex for, $50?" You can't do that. You have to play a whole word game, and there's things you can't say. So it takes a lot of finesse to be an effective vice cop, because
Yeah.
you have to be a smooth talker to some extent, or you have to be. I had one partner once who was just like so nervous and hated doing it that he was super effective, because he just came across as this like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm out here, but like I
Yeah.
don't know what to do. And it worked, it worked in its own way. But
Yeah.
so we were basically the chase car, and once you you would get a certain signal that they had agreed to a violation, and then you would pull the car over and you'd arrest the girl or the
So
guy
were
or
they
whatever it may
mic'd
be.
up? Were they texting you? How did it work?
No, it sometimes it was like we'd arrange, if you got the violation, you'll pull into this gas station, or you'll
Ah,
pull over on this street, or you'll put your blinker on, something that, whatever it was agreed upon that night. And so then we would go and do the admin part, arrest the girl, go back to the station, do all that stuff. And we would also once a month all the girls that, because the PED unit was, they called it the PED unit, prostitution enforcement detail. It was, that was probably the largest group of females I've ever worked with, because there were like 6 females in that unit. And we would go out once a month and we would be the prostitutes. We would have like these like sting operations, and
Well,
we had fun
it's
with
how you
it.
get your feet wet to get
Yes,
into the
exactly.
major part of the unit. Yeah.
Yes. And we would have like theme nights, like we're all going to do animal print tonight, or, it's so we had fun with it, and it was a cool group of girls, and it was a good time. And it was very awkward for me to be in that role. And on top of that, I was so used to being a uniform cop, and you can tell when someone's a cop, the way they
Yeah.
look around their environment, the way they talk to people, the way they stand, everything. And so it was training my brain to switch out of cop mode while still being aware of what's going on around you.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting transition, because it's not like a plainclothes cop detail where you still have your gun and badge and you're just in, jeans and a polo. It's straight up undercover. And when we did big operations, we would do these operations with the whole bureau. So there would be, 5 or 6 divisions in one bureau, and you'd have all the girls from the PED units in these divisions, and we'd go do these big task forces, and you were mic'd up for those. But just on a normal operation, we weren't mic'd up, and you would just then, as soon as you got the arrest, you would start taking notes to write your reports, because they had to be very accurate and factual.
Yeah.
And these, if the conversations weren't recorded, you had to have an accurate account of your conversation, and it generally wasn't a problem unless someone contested it.
Yeah.
I went
What years were you doing this?
like 2009
So Facebook had just
to
come
like
out.
13.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And we were doing a lot of the internet stuff. In this, we ended up getting a new supervisor, and he kind of wanted to shake things up a little bit. So he restructured things to where the girls would go out at the beginning of the night, make a couple arrests, come back in, and then the guys would go out later. So it got to the point where I was doing these operations pretty much daily, and I was very successful at it. I had this whole um, kind of white trash Bakersfield persona that
A little meth
that
girl.
yes,
Yeah.
basically, yes. And it's hard to pretend that when you have all your teeth and you don't have the meth sores, and it's like
Right.
you have to tell a good story. And my story was always like, I followed my boyfriend here, and then he ditched me, and now I can't make money to get back home, blah blah blah, whatever my story was. But we were doing this on a nightly basis, and I mean, it was just like go out, make a couple arrests, just do it every day. So when an opportunity came up for a loan to the Vice side, I was selected to do a loan. So I did a loan for Vice for a year, and then an opportunity came up to actually apply for a Vice position in another division. And that's how I ended up getting my P3 stripes, was transitioning and getting hired in that Vice unit. So I did 2 years in Hollywood, and then I did 2 years in North Hollywood division. And it was very different, because I went from this 30-person Vice unit to a 4-person Vice unit. So we worked incredibly differently. But that was where I was just in this undercover mode basically for almost 4 years. And I went from that to being a training officer on patrol. And it was like I should have been the rookie, because at that point I was so out of my element in patrol functions, because all I had done was undercover for so long, that when I went back as a training officer, I basically kind of had to like train myself how to be a training officer. And I was very fortunate. I had some really good rookies that knew what they were doing, and just trying to get back in that element of being oh yes, I'm in uniform. Like people know I'm a cop, because for so many years you're just in plain clothes everywhere.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting transition.
I had a buddy. He was telling me that the way that his team broke him in for Vice was they took him to a prostitute that is very good at smelling out cops and gets real handsy right away, like immediately.
Yeah.
And they got him with her, and she on cue was just like all over. He did. I'm a cop. I'm a cop. Like he freaked
Yeah.
out. He didn't know what to do because she was grabbing his shit and whatnot. And when she
Oh yeah.
she was hyper aggressive, I was like, well, that's a good way to like, you know,
Yeah,
figure.
we had several guys like that, and it was funny because one of them, I don't even know why he was working Vice, because every single time he's like, "No, man, she knows I'm a cop. She knows I'm a cop." Like, no, 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 I can't. Nope, she knows me. Nope, can't do this one. And it's like he just never wanted to go out and work. And but we did work. There's a huge transgender area in Hollywood. And so you had a lot of the guys, we worked with a lot of transgender prostitutes. And so you had a lot of the guys who were unsure of how to work with that and how to deal
Yeah,
with that. And we tried a lot of different things. Like sometimes we'd be partnered up and my partner and I would go out as like a husband and wife team. And we were, looking to pick up someone for the night because it was his birthday, just stuff like that. Just kind of, make it fun.
yeah, yeah. Freaks.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. So you go to Vice, you do that, you did the mounted stuff.
Mhm.
How many years? We're talking 11 years ish.
It was just shy of 12 years when I
Okay.
left.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you do that, and what caused you end up going to another division or another department.
Yes.
So
Yes.
not many people leave a department
No.
like LAPD at that mark because that is
No.
that's the tipping point for a lot of people. Like you're stuck.
Yes.
So what started causing this transition for you to start looking elsewhere?
So I absolutely loved being a cop. Like that it, it turned into like this amazing dream career for me. And like I said, my intention was ride it out with mounted until retirement. LAPD, the city in general, the politics became so enmeshed in the culture of the police department, working for a city that didn't support you, for a city council that didn't support you, for a governor that didn't support you, and then having your own command staff and admin not supporting you. It for me became an environment where I felt like I was no longer effective in my job. Pretty much everything was being decriminalized. Um, Nothing was getting prosecuted. You make these arrests, you take someone to jail. It's a revolving door. They're out the back door before you even get back in your patrol car. Like it was to such an extent that I felt like I wasn't making a difference anymore. And I wasn't at that point where I was purposefully looking to leave, but I was getting very disheartened by my job. And my best friend at the time, she had moved to Washington State. And I went out there to visit her, and it's just so beautiful. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's gorgeous. I love the forest and the trees and the cold, and so for me it was like, oh, it's amazing. I Maybe when I retire I want to move somewhere like this. And she knew I was unhappy with the way things were going in my department and watching my friends get benched for things they didn't do wrong, and being investigated, like even things like just have body cams.
Mm-hmm.
So LAPD got body cams probably my last year there, and I think they're an outstanding tool, and they can be incredibly effective. But the department was using them for things like getting officers in trouble. They'd review a thing and said, "Well, you said fuck 4 times in your interaction with this person, so we're going to have to write you up for that. You're wearing nail polish, and that's against policy, so we're going to have to write you up for that." Things like that were just so petty and so ridiculous and so demoralizing and disheartening for officers. I never got in trouble my entire career. I never got written up for anything. I have an outstanding career record, but watching other people go through those things was very upsetting to me because these were good people that were out there kicking ass and doing a good job and getting in trouble for dumb shit. And
Yeah,
I
they were on
just
a
wasn't on
fishing.
board.
Yeah, they're on a
Yes.
fishing expedition rather than looking into an actual complaint, which I'm all
Right.
for. Like, if you've
Mhm.
got a legitimate complaint where somebody is like, that officer was wearing nail polish, and you're
Right.
like, oh shit, well, let me check the body cam. Oh yeah,
Mhm.
they were. Hey, dude, like, you knew the rules.
Yes.
I wouldn't have looked, but this person complained. There it is.
Yeah.
So I, it is what it is. I gotta either
Right.
give you a verbal or whatever it is. Don't do that shit again.
Right.
Um, yeah,
But it was
yeah,
just so pervasive, and your hands were tied behind your back pretty much all the time. So when I was talking to my best friend about it, unbeknownst to me, she sends my resume to this small department in Washington. It's Bremerton Police Department.
she
It's
did it
right.
without telling you.
She did it without telling me.
That's
So
good
it's this.
BFF.
Oh, she's amazing. It's a small department across the bay from Seattle, and there's like 60 officers. So coming from 10,000 to 60, that's a huge transition.
Yeah.
But I get this phone call one day, and it's a message from a lieutenant saying, "Hey, we got your resume. We're really interested in meeting with you. Please give me a call." And I went, first of all, where is Bremerton? And second, why is this guy calling me?
Yeah.
And so I text my best friend. I'm like, did you send my resume to Bremerton Police Department? And she's like, yes, I did. I was like, okay. And I just kind of was like, all right, let me see what they have to say. So I called, and he's like, first of all, I have to ask, why would you want to leave LAPD? And I was very honest. And I said, California, this area of Southern California is just basically turned into a shithole. And I'm in a position where I don't feel like I'm helping anybody anymore. And I came into this job to be a leader, to be effective, and to make a difference. And I don't feel like I'm doing that anymore. Long story short, 3 months later, I'm up in Washington State. I'm working for this small department. I'm back on patrol. And now I'm by myself. And LAPD is, you always work in partners. You never work
Right.
alone.
2-man. Yep.
Yes. And now I'm in a one-man car. And I was I think I had like 3 months with a training officer because all he needed really was to understand the difference between Washington laws and California laws. But it was a very different environment. And it was, I got in a lot of fights at LAPD, like a lot. And you were always, I mean, everyone is either high on narcotics or dealing with some sort of mental illness in the areas that I worked, or
Right.
they're gang members. So you're constantly getting into physical altercations. And doing that with a partner is very different from doing that by yourself, especially by yourself as a small female. So when I started in this job and I was working nights by myself, and there's a lot of crazy up in Washington. And, people say it's the weather,
Yeah.
um, but a lot of drugs and a lot of crazy. So I realized I kind of had to change the way I was used to doing police work because I was so used to just get out of the car, let's figure this out. And I've always got my partner to back me up if things go awry. I'm not a dick as a cop. I never have been. I've been that cop that takes people to jail and they say, "Hey, thank you." Cuz I've always treated people with respect and like they're human beings. And so I kind of learned to use talking even more when I was working by myself because, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know
Yeah.
what, like, do you work in partners or do you work by yourself?
You can do both.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
just whatever you're feeling that day.
Yeah. And this was, I mean, it was a small department. So half the time you didn't have enough people to man a shift. You never had a two-man car. So it was a very interesting experience for me. I had all of my knowledge from working in LA, which was very beneficial to me. And at this point, I knew how to carry myself as an officer very well. And I never got in a situation that was completely out of control. But being a small female alone at night, you have to carry yourself and present yourself a little differently. So
Yeah.
that was a different experience for me. And I really only worked patrol for about 1 year because as soon as I was done, I had the opportunity to promote to detectives. So
Okay.
yeah, I did that 1 year. It was basically like finish your year of probation, and my skills, they were like, yeah, we want you as a detective. And I was like, hell yeah, I'll do that. And it was the second coolest thing I ever did
Yeah.
was being a detective in a small department, because with LAPD, you're a detective in a particular area of expertise. Like you're working auto theft or you're working burglary, and in a small department, you just do it all.
General
So
assignment.
yeah,
Yep.
you get a homicide one day and you get a child abuse the next day. Like you're all over the place. And so
What was
that
the
to me was so
population
cool.
out there?
The population, well, it was different during the day and at night because the city, there's a major naval base in Bremerton. So during the day, you had all the civilian population that worked at the naval base and then that worked in the city. And then at night, it would quiet back down, maybe 10,000.
Okay.
So it was definitely different at night than during the day. And then it was a ferry ride from Seattle. So you just had that ferry traffic that would come over all the time.
So you just up and quit
Yeah,
LAPD,
I
and
did.
what was that conversation like with the people that you worked with?
Everyone thought I was crazy, you know?
Especially, you probably took a pay cut.
A huge huge I took, like, a $65,000 pay cut, yes.
Ooh,
It
but
it
the
was
cost of living was probably a lot
yeah,
less.
cost of living was less, and there was no state tax in Washington. So, from where I came from, it almost evened out just based on taxes alone, but my family was very supportive. I had friends who were envious. I had friends in LAPD who were like, "I wish I could leave, but, my wife doesn't work. I have 3 kids. I'm 12 years into the job. I'm definitely not going anywhere."
Yep.
Making that decision at the 12-year mark was a difficult thing to do because I gave up my pension to start over, and I gave up my seniority to start over. Yes, I was fortunate that once I finished probation at Bremerton, I got to jump right into detectives, which was an awesome opportunity, but I gave up everything that I had worked for, and I was starting over again.
Yeah. Damn. Yeah, that's ballsy.
Yeah.
I know I couldn't do it. I did leave another department, but I left early. Like I still I didn't I wasn't at that 10-year mark. So, um, but now I'm stuck like Chuck. Even if I wanted to go anywhere, unless
How
somebody out there is gonna offer me like 300 grand a year, I ain't going nowhere.
how many years do you have on?
17 now.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah,
Yep. It's but yeah, it's one of those things, man. I like where I'm at though too. I love it.
yeah.
So still get to do the policing side and all that stuff. But where you were at or in Washington, what was the politics like? Because I know Seattle officers are jumping ship left and right.
Well, that was the thing. The department that I worked for and the city was very law enforcement friendly. The community was very law enforcement friendly. I I have nothing whatsoever negative to say about that department. I had a very supportive crew when I was working there. It was very interesting because I coming from LAPD, you don't talk to command staff. You know,
Right. It's so
you
big.
never, yes, you never, and God forbid, like the chief's not going to interact with you.
Yeah.
And
And
I
they're
now
not
I'm
even gonna
working
know you.
no, and now I'm in this small department where, the chief walks up and says, "Hey, how are you doing?" and knows about your life, knows about what you're doing. All the sergeants, all the supervisors, captains, everybody knows you by on a first name basis. It was really weird for me just because I hadn't had that experience. And it was so cool because I felt like this is awesome. I'm working in a supportive community with a supportive department. And, even the citizens were very pro law enforcement. So it was such a shift from working in Los Angeles. And it was awesome until COVID hit and until, the George Floyd incident and until the spillover from Seattle with all of the politics. And the governor of Washington, Inslee, was one of the leaders of what do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? Like law enforcement reform. He was
Defunding.
yes, he
One of
was
the
he
defunders.
was one of the big proponents of defunding the police and police reform.
Because that
And so
takes the blame off of him.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it had a huge impact on my job and it had a huge impact on all of the policies that were being instituted. And Washington, similar to California, decriminalized basically all the drugs. So you're making arrests. Well, now you're not even making arrests because you can't arrest for anything. In the 3 years I was there, I did not have one single case prosecuted. And I am talking not pithy little misdemeanor cases. I'm talking some very significant felony cases that were never prosecuted. There was always just this very disheartening thing going on with the court system. And as much as my department itself was very supportive, the overall doom and gloom of working in that state that was like a very anti law enforcement state. And once they started talking about getting rid of, the immunity for law enforcement and really cracking down on making cops responsible, like, yes, you should absolutely be responsible. And if you fuck up something in your job, I am the first one to say, yes, you get what you deserve. And you should be prosecuted for doing something criminal as a law enforcement officer. I am not one of those people that's just like straight up back the blue across the board, even when people do something wrong. But when cops are out there doing the right thing and they are getting persecuted and prosecuted for doing the right thing, I cannot get on board with that. And that's what started happening in Washington. And all of the anti law enforcement sentiment, I just like, because I had been there for 3 years, I knew I would have to put in a significant amount of time to get back to that point where I would be able to get my pension. And when they hired me, it was with they gave me 10 years of service. So they allowed my LAPD time to come through. But I would still have to do another 8 years, 7 years.
Right.
And I got to the point where I felt like once again, I was no longer making a difference. And I was going against the grain of my beliefs, being asked to enforce laws that I thought were unconstitutional during COVID, and like basically hunting down people for trying to make a living and support their families. Like, I couldn't get on board with any of that.
Yeah.
And it was just, I said, I can't do this. And it was a very difficult decision for me to give up my law enforcement career because I loved being a cop. Like, I absolutely loved it. And making that decision to leave was just picking my mental health and my personal sanity
Yeah.
to get out.
I've said that before. I said, if you ever start trying to make me do things that are unconstitutional, like,
Mhm.
sorry, like, one, you're gonna have to fire me, but I'm not
Right.
gonna do it. And two, like, even as cops, like, I'm military as well. So even in military, we swore to uphold the Constitution. That's one oath.
Yes.
And then I took the same basic oath as becoming a police officer. I've taken the
Mhm.
oath twice. Like,
Yeah.
if you try to make me violate constitutional rights, it's not happening. I'm not doing it. So, luckily, Texas, we got our shit together, I think, and we're
Yes.
not playing those games. So, it sucks that your department got wrapped up in that kind of again, in a sense. The
And it
second
was
place.
yeah, it was hard because the department was really trying to be supportive of its officers, which, like I said, that was not the case in LAPD. But when it comes down to state policies that are being instituted, your department can't do anything about that. Like, it is what it is.
Yeah,
And when you have a governor and a state government that does not support its law enforcement,
yeah,
it's a no-win situation. So, as I said, I have nothing bad to say about that department itself.
yeah,
And they're amazing people there. I could not stay in that state. And I am almost 49 years old. So, when I moved to Texas, I got a lot of oh, you should apply to Amarillo, or you should apply here. We're hiring, X and so is hiring. I'm like, I'm not doing this
I'm
again.
not
Like,
starting over.
I'm
Yeah,
not starting over again.
yeah. It's a young
I'm
man's
not.
game out in
It
patrol, or a
is.
young woman's
Yeah,
game. Yeah,
it is. It absolutely
yeah.
is.
I'm I'm tired of it. I'm 40, and I'm
Yeah.
like, We just, just the other night we had to take somebody down, and it
Hmm.
wasn't anything major. In the experience level of my team, where we saw it coming. We were ready for him. We knew he would probably try to run. So as soon as he
Yeah.
started to pull away, we were already on top of it, put him on the ground. I'm just sitting there. I'm like, and it's so funny, bad guys. It's like they all learn from the same book, like,
Yes.
what did I do? Why you arresting me for? What do you think? All this shit. Exactly. I just got that 30 round mag handgun that you just did a home invasion with. Like, what time it is, dude. Quit
Yeah.
saying all this dumb shit. It's like you guys got the bad guy handbook or script of all the dumb stuff to say. And
Well,
you get tired of it, you know?
yeah, and
I
that
couldn't
was
start
part of
over
the
with that.
no, and that was part of the thing with LAPD too in my decision to leave. It got to the point where, like I said, everything was pretty much getting decriminalized. So, somebody has a weapon or they have drugs or like they're a legitimate suspect. If they run, you don't chase them. Like
Yeah.
it got to the point where you cannot go in foot pursuit for any of these things. And it's all on body cam. You're standing there, the guy takes off running, and you just like turn and your camera just watches them run down the street. And it's like, how? How are we doing this? Like it was completely crazy to me that it was just like free for all, rampant crime, and we're not going to do anything about
And
it. We're
you
going to stand by.
and you wonder why it's getting so violent on the streets.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And like the mounted unit is by far the most effective means of crowd control.
Oh, for
And
sure.
yeah, it's phenomenal. And
Yep.
when I first got into the unit, it was during the time of the elections in 2016. And we were having a lot of the protests and riots in Southern California, and we worked a lot of the presidential details. So whenever the president or vice president or foreign dignitaries would come to town, we would work a lot of those events. And I, there were so many times where we'd be out there on a skirmish line, ready to go. And then they would say, no, the horses are too intimidating. Y'all need to go stand by 2 blocks away, and we're not going to use you.
That's the point of the horses.
Right, exactly. And it was like then that just kept happening over and over and over again. And then they said, you know, you're not going to do crime control anymore. You are just going to go out there and be high visibility, smile and wave and make friends with the community. Is there a time and place for that? Absolutely. But when you're in a unit that is supposed to do directed enforcement and actually combat crime, and then you're being told no, you can't do that anymore because it looks bad. And, we're turning into a free for all, kindler, gentler department where we don't enforce crime. It's just like, what's your job then? I did not become a cop to smile and wave and shake hands with the community on a daily basis. Like I will shake your hand and have a conversation and smile and wave if that's the interaction that
Yeah.
comes up. But when I'm doing a job that's out there to arrest criminals and help control criminal activity and I'm being told I can't do it, I'm not
Yeah.
effective anymore.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by HRH Combat Arms. They can turn your vision into reality. They specialize in gunsmithing and Cerakoting. Your Cerakote specialist is Air Force veteran and retired police sergeant Paul Ware, aka the Sarge. He can Cerakote your firearms, auto parts, tools, even your sports equipment. This veteran-owned business is located at 5025 Saunders Suite 103, Fort Worth, Texas 76119. You can call them at 682-304-0363, and you can find them online at www.hrhcombatarms.com. That's www.hrhcombatarms.com. So one of the things that have been weighing on my mind over the last few years, because I see the recruiting. I see how few bodies we're getting in through the doors these days to become cops.
Yeah.
And I've heard of a lot of people quitting and moving on to other careers. And I've actually met a couple that I work with that it wasn't necessarily because of anything specific that happened where I'm at, but it is the overall tone that they've been seeing. And they're just like, you know what? I've got my time in and I can leave. So I'm just going to leave before it gets worse. So
Hmm.
I get those people too. However, you're the first person I've met from another agency, outside, especially a state that I would probably think would have a lot of cops quitting,
Mhm.
Washington and California,
Yes.
especially the Portland, Oregon thing, the
Oh, yeah.
Seattle, Washington, and then just California in general. It, you're proof that I'm not, my thoughts aren't wrong. There are people leaving this career field because they can't do it anymore.
Right.
They're physically being told, like, you cannot enforce the law. You can't do what you were set out to do. So
Yes.
for somebody with your amount of time in to take that stance, shows that the cops that are out there are morally and ethically sound. And you can tell that because look what you just did to a morally and ethically sound officer who had to do nothing but uphill battle her whole career,
Yeah.
because she's really short and she's female. And so you you put your money where your mouth is, in a sense. That, it's kudos to you, because there's a lot of people that would just stick out a job because they're stuck.
Yes, and I know so many people who are in that position, and I think with hiring cops now, it's very different because they're coming into a different environment than I came into, and so they're being taught completely different in the academy than I was. The standards are totally different, so they're walking into it with a completely different perspective. Whereas I kind of came in on the tail end of what I like to call, like, quote, real police work,
Yeah.
because I had a few really good years in my career and then like everything just went to shit. But cops that are being hired now, they just don't know any different. So you can train and mold them a certain way because they haven't been exposed to real police work, and you can train them to do the smile and wave and just be there police work.
Yeah, what do you see? What's the writing on your wall? What's the future of policing looking like to you from an outside looking in now, from somebody with experience?
Well, I think it really depends because if you follow a lot of these cities that went on their big defund the police rants, and those are all cities that are experiencing insane escalation in crime. You look at New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Los Angeles. Like, when I left, about a year after I left LAPD, it was getting to the point where it was so bad that the department was issuing public notices of, don't wear expensive jewelry in public, don't go into this neighborhood at night, be aware of your surroundings at all time, don't take the train. You're basically telling people, don't live your life, you know
Yeah.
don't go outside, stay at home. What a horrible message to be sending to your community. Is crime is so bad that you don't go outside, but we're not going to do anything about it because we don't tackle crime anymore. What message are you sending to your community? And I think it's going to get to the point where some communities get so fed up that there's going to have to be some kind of reverting back to
Hmm.
more law enforcement. But I think it's going to have to ride this wave first of getting so bad
You got to hit rock
that,
bottom before you know
yes,
what. Yeah.
yes. I mean, you look at, um, what was it? I just talked about this on my podcast the other day. I can't remember what city it was now, but they're hiring private security because they don't have enough cops. And what's private security going to do? Sure, it's a high visibility
Yeah.
thing, but
Observe
any
and
real
report.
criminal, yeah, any real criminal knows, like, oh, that security guard's not going to do shit. I'm just going to go in there and do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so it's just going to have to get to a point in these larger communities where it's so bad that there is like a reinvigoration of promoting law enforcement. And I look at like the community I live in now. I went from, I mean, I grew up my entire life. I've lived in big cities, and I am now in this small, fairly rural community with a police department of maybe 20 people, and the community likes the cops. And it's just so different from where I came from. And you don't see these issues with massive crime here because they enforce the laws.
Yeah. What I think, what I'd like to see, this is one of the fixes I see for it. Chiefs growing some fucking balls.
Oh, yes.
That's
Yes.
what I would like to see. I love that dude from Polk County. I just pulled up
Yes.
his picture real quick so people know who I'm talking about. Let me get his picture up here. Uh, let's see. I'll share it real quick. This guy, Judd Grady, I think his name is Grady Judd. He's a Polk County sheriff. That dude is the epitome of you're not going to tell me how to police my area.
Right.
And if you don't like it, vote me out or fire
Yeah.
me. Like nobody will do that anymore. Nobody's willing to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to tell my guys not to do that. This is what the law says, and that's what I'm going to enforce. I'm not going to enforce your policies and procedures when it's directly contradicting the law. And if you want me out, you're going to have to fire me for it. And then see what the citizens do, because
Right.
you're pandering to the loud minority.
Yes.
And your actual voters and stuff are hopefully, if you are in the morally and ethically right window, they're going to back you. And if they don't, is that where you want to be a chief? I don't.
Right. Right.
I've
And
told
that was
people.
one of the big things with California in Los Angeles. You have LA County, which is a sheriff, and that sheriff is elected. And then you have LAPD, where the chief is appointed by the city. And our chief had no fucking balls. I mean, I will be straight out. And I said that during my exit interview, that the reason I am leaving is because our command staff doesn't stand up for its officers, and our chief has no balls and will send his officers out into the field to not be able to do their job. LA County Sheriff, on the other hand, people love working for him. I mean, we're literally next door neighbors. Like there's a jurisdictional line
Yeah.
on one side of the street, and it's an entirely different world because he stands up for his officers. He will get on the media and he said, "No, we're not going to do this." And I didn't want to stay in California to transition to another, agency because I wanted to get out of California, period. But to see the difference like that is exactly what you're saying. And it's like, yeah, I would work for someone like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the officers you want to bring in. You want the guys that
Mhm.
want to go out there and actually work, do their job, and be supported, knowing that your chief or your sheriff or whoever it is has your back. And that aspect is the product. The proof is in the product you get from those officers. And
Yes.
there, when you go to a LAPD in that type of environment, you're either going to get two things. You're going to get a what appears to be a lazy cop, which is technically a smart cop these days out there,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
or you're going to get somebody hurt. Officer's going to get
Hmm.
hurt. So,
Yes.
which route do you want to take? Do you want hurt officers, or do you want which? I've seen the writing on the wall. It seems like that's what they want in some places, is the officers to get hurt. That's not the type of rock bottom I was talking about wanting to hit. I don't want that to happen. But it's not good for anybody all around. It's not good for the citizens. It's not good for the police officers. But if we just get chiefs and sheriffs to start coming together and saying, like, look, yeah, go ahead, fire me, because
Yeah.
the city next door will hire me in a heartbeat. I'll go over there and then I'll show the difference between my style and what you're trying to enforce make. Because my
But
city is going to be cleaned up and that side's going to get worse.
but the citizens have to speak up. And
Yeah.
one of the things I noticed during the whole, George Floyd era was that was when I was working for Bremerton. And you had a lot of citizens that were afraid to speak up in support of police,
Yeah.
even though they were supportive. And we would have, people secretively bringing by baked goods and with little notes that saying, "We support you." And you did have that support from the community, which was awesome, but it wasn't outspoken.
Yeah.
So the general, you know, aura that was surrounding everything was just this like everybody hates the cops.
Yeah.
And it was a very depressing experience for most law enforcement officers going to work and doing your job every day, and just this constant barrage of anti-cop sentiment coming down
And
on you.
being embarrassed to
Yeah.
show that you support the police.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
that was kind of like what the military went through during Vietnam.
Hmm.
You couldn't show support for troops back then, and look at where we've come. We had to hit rock bottom and show the lives of these homeless veterans everywhere, which was the Vietnam era.
Yeah.
And why was that? Oh, that was because they were the bad batch as far as the United States was concerned, and we had to learn. And now, now being military is highly supported. Totally
Right.
opposite. Like
Yep.
you're an asshole if you're not supporting your military. So I'm hoping it switches back down that
It's
path.
there's always going to be an incident that comes up where a cop does something in the wrong
Hmm.
that's going to be highlighted. And
Which one was the George Floyd? I'm trying to remember which one that was.
oh, the Minneapolis officer that had
Kneeling
his
on the neck.
knee on the neck.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The one that the one that sparked the
Yeah.
riots across America.
Yeah.
Yes.
I get the names like Eric Garner, Michael Brown. All these incidents that spark controversy. I get them mixed up in my head because you hear so all these different ones, and some are bullshit, some are legit.
Right. But this is one of those career fields where you can do good for 20 years with not a spark of anything negative on your record, and one unfortunate incident happens, whether it was, even if it wasn't purposeful,
Right.
and something happens, and like, not only is your career destroyed, but your entire department's like
Yeah.
has this negative connotation now because of something that happened. And it's not reflective of everybody on the job. Are there shitty cops out there? Absolutely. There's shitty people in every career field. But of all the cops I've worked with, I've encountered a handful of shitty ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And to either and even the shitty ones, it's not like they're out there being violating people's rights or
Right.
doing illegal things. They're just assholes, and you don't agree with the way they police
Right.
most of the time.
Most of the time.
If I see somebody breaking the law as a cop, like, too bad, so sad, bro. Like, I'm gonna get you. Like,
Right.
you're not making it worse for me. And that's one
Right.
of the things we never hear those stories of cops policing cops,
Mhm.
which is what a lot of citizens want to see and hear. They
Yeah.
want that stuff, but you never hear it because the media is not going to cover it because you
No.
did what you're supposed to do.
And that's where I think body cams came in as a good thing,
Oh yeah,
because especially in California and Los Angeles, the community was so outraged by, incidents that were happening. And then body cam footage started showing, it kind of like shut up the community in a certain
yeah,
aspect, because it was showing like the officers were doing the right thing. Here's what happened beforehand. But
yep.
then the media gets hold of these things and they play short clips and they don't show the whole story. And then you get this perception of just rogue cops out there doing all this crazy stuff. And it's not accurate to what actually happened.
Yeah, and that's where police departments need to learn. Like, if you have an incident that could even remotely be controversial, you need to use social media as your own conduit to get your message
Yes.
out there uninterrupted, unbroken, full transparency. And that is a good tool. That's how you should be using social media and body camera footage, because now
Yes.
there's no you oh, you watched that clip on YouTube? Okay, here's the full thing. Like, check that
Hmm.
out. Then get
Yep.
back with me. And it shuts you the fuck
Exactly.
up.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But all right. Well, you quit a career field you love, and you've explained why that happened, and you moved. You moved out of Washington, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Hmm.
Now where a boots are you living?
So I am in the panhandle of Texas,
Hell yeah.
in a town called Canyon, which is near Amarillo.
All right.
And I came here on vacation with a friend. I had no intentions of moving here. I didn't even know where this place was. And when we were on this trip, we ended up going out to this winery and ended up talking to the owner for several hours. Next thing I know, I'm getting a job offer. I hear myself saying, "Sure, that sounds great." It was a part-time job at like $10 an hour. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I just went, yeah, I'm ready for a change.
Dang.
Yeah, I went home. I resigned. The funny thing is, four of us resigned at the same time, including my sergeant.
Oh shit. Had you
Our
guys talked about this prior, or you just
we were all so, I mean, it was literally, it was at that point where you'd come into the unit every day and it was just one news story after another, and Washington was just so awful. Like I said, it was just all about police reform and defund the police. And every article that was written, every, all this legislation, this 10-page document came out with all the impending legislation that was basically destroying police work. And I was the only one that left that didn't have 20 years on. Like, the other people that left, they were like, okay, I was going to do another 5, but fuck it, I'm leaving.
yeah.
And I was the only one that was like, well, I'm leaving regardless of my time. And, it was such a fiasco. Like, I didn't even know, I didn't have a home when I moved here. I was one of those people that like bought their home without ever seeing it. And then I found myself constantly having to apologize. Like, yes, I'm from California. Please don't hold that against me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm, I'm not one of those people, just
Yeah.
like, it was that kind of situation. And my part-time job ended up turning into a full-time job. And I just kind of made this transition. I always wanted this life of just kind of living out in rural America and having a little bit of land and not living in the city. And that's the life I have right now. I got a couple goats. I've got some horses on my property. I'm kind of like living the dream,
Yeah.
that I thought I wasn't going to live until retirement, except I'm living it on a budget.
Are they fainting goats?
No, they're
Damn.
not. They're not.
Say, I'll come
No,
visit just to
they're
scare them.
they're little runty
They'll
goats. They're
keep the
adorable
grass
though.
clipped for you, for
Exactly.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're working for a winery place?
I'm managing a winery,
Okay.
and it's like, what a culture shock going from, basically 20 years in a government career to being back in the private sector, working for a small company,
Yeah.
and
A little
just,
more
that,
hippie-ish.
yes, that
Yeah.
transition it's had its challenges, I'm not going to lie. I am so used to that paramilitary structure of, you do what your job is, whatever you're expected to do, and you don't show up late, and
Yeah.
you're responsible. And
Lot less stress over there, huh?
yes,
Yeah.
and this is different because the civilian world is just like, there's a different level or lack of accountability for a lot of things. So coming from that paramilitary mindset, like, that's been a transition for me.
Okay.
At the same time, it's like, I don't have that responsibility. I don't take my work home with me,
Yeah.
and I'm not getting calls in the middle of the night to come out to a homicide scene. It's just totally
Yeah.
different. I leave work and I go home and I do my thing.
So
And
I'm not a wine drinker. I
okay.
really couldn't even tell you the differences between any of them. Every time I drink wine, for the most part, I get a headache, so I try to avoid it. But the one wine that I do like is a Pinot Noir.
Okay.
So I
Yes.
don't know what that means as far as my palate goes, but I've tried a lot of wine, and the only one that I seem pretty consistent on is a Pinot Noir. So is
You're
what it is.
more you're probably more of a dry wine guy then. Like I can't do sweet wines.
Okay.
And the winery I work for, it's like 100% Texas grapes on everything, and people think you can't grow Pinot in the Texas High Plains, but you actually can.
Okay.
And we just made it a phenomenal Pinot that we just bottled. So
All right.
we'll
So
send you a bottle of that
I'm
Pinot and
expecting
see what
to
you think.
yes, I'm expecting to partake.
Yes.
What's the brand?
It's called Bar Z Winery,
Bar
and
Z.
Bar
Okay.
Z. Yes.
Okay. So like
Yeah.
they're still naming it's very Texan because it's a ranch.
Well, the
That's the name of a
yes.
ranch.
Well, that it's the owner's cattle brand. He grew up on a cattle farm, and he's been making wine since he was like 9 years old, and he's in his 60s now.
Okay.
And that was his brand that he used to start the winery. So,
So are you out there like taking your shoes and socks off and crushing the wine old school style?
no, but we did do that a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
we got grapes in for some new wine, and we like set up a little bin outside so the kids could come and adults too. Anyone who wanted to stomp grapes could go out there and stomp
Okay,
grapes.
very
So
cool. I guess that would be texturally pleasing.
it, it was disgusting to me, but okay.
And this is our foothills wine
Right,
here.
exactly.
Nasty. All right, ma'am. Well, we get through all of this, and there's a whole another part of the story to your life that you're starting to kick off, and you briefly
Yes.
mentioned it earlier, but we'll hit that now. You started a podcast, which you and I, this is kind of the conversation we had at Black Rifle, and you were like, "What? You do podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." So, you told me that you had a podcast going. What was the motivation? What is the podcast? Let's go down that road.
So the podcast is called Unapologetically Outspoken, and it initially was not going to be a podcast. When I left my law enforcement career, it was really the first time in about 20 years between my law enforcement and fire service that I've been in a position where I can speak my mind. You know, as a cop, you don't have opinions. You know, you don't have a political opinion one way or the other. And there are some things I feel very strongly about in supporting America and supporting our military and supporting our Constitution. And there are things that I believe are happening in our world right now that I'm not in agreement with. And this is the first time in my adult life that I've had the opportunity to speak out about how I feel without the repercussions of, getting in trouble at my job or getting fired. And it started as a blog post. I was just going to write blog articles every week and, just based on things I felt strongly about or I was doing at the time. And one of my friends has her own podcast, and she read my articles and she said, you should really do a podcast. And I thought, oh no, like I don't do social media. I have an Instagram page with some pictures of horses, dogs, and my goats on it. I don't have Facebook. I am not technically savvy. Like even setting up for this podcast, took a lot of work because this is not my forte. I'm not a technical wizard and I'm not a social media guru. I'm not an influencer. And when she suggested doing a podcast together, it was weird because we both kind of thought about it at the same time. And it was like, she has a forum where she's very much into like personal development and law of attraction, manifesting, positivity, stuff like that. And she shares the beliefs that I do and feeling very strongly about certain things that are happening right now. But her podcast was not really the forum to speak out about that because it's not her audience. And we decided to go on this venture together. And I just kind of went, yeah, okay, let's do it. I have no idea what I'm doing, but let's do it. And we started this podcast almost 2 months ago now. And so the unapologetically outspoken brand, I guess, was something that I came up with because that's how I feel. At this point in my life, I am unapologetically outspoken about my beliefs and in supporting America. And I'm creating that platform. Um, the I had a friend at work who helped me create a website because I didn't know what I was doing. Like she had to help me even figure out how to make a blog. Like I said, I'm technologically inept. And so it's been a learning experience. This whole venture has been going on for maybe 3 months now. And we're slowly building our audience. It's, we're two like patriotic females. So we're kind of appealing to more of a female audience, I would think. She's a mom of 3 kids, so she brings the mom perspective to a lot of things that are going on. And it's been really fun. We record podcasts Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So it's like we do Motivation Monday, Weird Wednesday, where we talk about weird things going on in the country. And then we have Freedom Fridays, which are kind of focused on very pro America topics. So that's kind of the format for our podcast. And anyone that's listening that's interested, or someone that's interested, we would absolutely love for you to come check it out. We're really trying to gain a following. So
There you go.
Yeah.
Are you guys are you doing remote podcasts like these?
Yeah, yes, she lives in Florida,
Oh,
and
okay.
yeah, and actually last week because of the hurricane, we she lives in Tampa and it was expected to hit Tampa. So like Monday night, we ended up doing 3 recordings in one night just in case because she ended up evacuating, but came back yesterday. And I'm kind of learning as I go. Like if you listen to some of the very first podcasts, the audio on my end is absolutely horrific. I was recording in my living room, with this high ceilings, and it was awful
Yeah.
to the point where my boss ended up buying me this professional microphone because he said, "You sound like crap."
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, "She sounds so professional and you don't." And so,
It
and I'm
makes a
like,
big
"No,
difference.
you're
Yep.
absolutely right." And so it's very new for me, and I didn't think I would like doing a podcast, but I actually really do.
It's fun, ain't it?
Yeah, it
About
is.
how long are your episodes?
We keep them at 30 minutes. So they're
Okay.
all very short. And like I said, 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
Very smart. A lot of people get mad at me because mine go on so
So
long,
long.
but I said, I have a vision. I know what I want to do. Just
Mhm.
trust me. If it's not for you, it ain't for you, but I know what I want to do. I want to have a actual full conversation and hash out issues and details and stuff like that so everybody can either agree, disagree, learn, whatever it is, but that's the only way we're going to try to make things a little bit better because nobody's having these conversations. It's all talking points. It's all sound clips and sound bites and all that bullshit. I'm not about that. I like it's one of the things I learned from Rogan's podcast. That's why I like it because it's fully developed thought. Like everybody gets a chance to say what they're thinking and get it all out there. So
I'm actually impressed by your podcast. Like after we met at Black Rifle and I went and I checked it out and I listened to multiple episodes and I'm like, yeah, this is really long, but you do some outstanding interviews and people really get their perspectives across. And
yeah,
so it's a very cool format.
I appreciate it. And just like you, my first few episodes, shoot, probably my first 6 months were hot garbage. Is just trying to figure out audio and video because for the
Yeah.
longest time I was recording like at a iPhone, an older iPhone was my camera, an iPad, a new iPad. So like I'm like, well, I'll put the new iPad on the guest because they're the important person, and then I'll use the phone for the wide angle because that has the most storage on it. So for whatever reason, one of the cameras go down, the phone will
Yeah.
keep going, and I'll have a wide angle for both of us. So in my audio, my very first episode when I talked, I'm in the like right ear, and then my buddy that was talking, he's in your left ear. So like you're hearing this weird effect in your car or on your headphones. So there's a lot to learn,
Yeah.
but it's
And
fun.
I'm still learning. I'm absolutely still
Oh,
learning.
you're gonna
Um,
continually
yeah.
learn. And if you guys are doing remote, highly suggest Restream, what I'm using.
Okay.
Because like I said, you can plug things. I can have these things pop up. You
Yeah.
can put your own stuff on there, tell people where to go. Two cops, one donut. We can show off your websites and stuff like that, which I'm doing right now. Her Instagram is unapologetically outspoken. And it's all one word, so you can find that. If you are listening only, make sure you check out the YouTube version of my podcast or Rumble, whatever one you're into. I'm showing the page right now so you can see it, and then also her blog slash website is also up here, so you can see that. I would say it out loud, but it wouldn't make any sense to you because it's a weird website. msha.ke. What does that stand for?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know
My
either.
partner created it. There's another easy version if you just go unapologeticallyoutspoken.com.
Oh, well, there you go. Let's unapologetically outspoken. Let's see what that does for us. Oh, there we go.
And that brings you to the original blog site. And if you click on the little hamburger thing on the left at the top, it breaks it up into the blog or the podcast. And
Okay.
then you can also access it that way.
There we go. And again, if you're just listening, make sure you check out the YouTube or the Rumble channel, Two Cops, One Donut, and you will see exactly what we are talking about here. It is October 2nd is the day of this recording, but it won't be out probably till mid to late November because I'm so far ahead. So yeah. All right, let me get this off of there. For some reason my connection is going low and I am hardwired in, so that's weird. I hope I don't lose you all of a sudden. I never see yellow on my. You can't
Oh,
see it, but I can
yeah.
see our connection strength. There it goes.
Okay.
Went back to green. Mine never turned yellow because I got an actual Ethernet cable in, so it just went to like yellow real quick. I was like, oh, I might lose her here. But well, that is awesome, Tara. I appreciate you being on here. Unless you
Thank you
got,
for having me.
if you got
Yeah, this was
anything else you
awesome.
want to hit, though, we can absolutely hit that. So, but thanks for moving to Texas. Just just remember why you moved out here.
Oh,
That's what we
yes.
tell everybody.
Yes.
Because
Yep.
I'm an implant
I
too.
Where are you
Uh,
from?
Michigan.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah, I'm
right.
from Flint. I got the hell out of
Okay.
there. So, joined the military. That was my escape. Got out. Started realizing like how awesome other places can be, and that you know, I tell people Flint is like being in the Matrix. Like you just don't know you're in it till you get out of it. And then
Yeah.
I got out and realized like, oh my god, it's like amazing out here. I need to so what do they call it? Sow my royal oats. Get
Yes.
me and rescued my wife, and we both left Flint, and we haven't looked back. We go visit from time to time,
Yeah.
and every time we visit, we're like, man, I'm so glad we got. It's just a reminder of why I didn't stay there.
I am so happy here. Like, I absolutely love Texas.
Texas is
And
great,
yeah,
man.
it
I can't
is.
complain. I just tell people I'm like, man, there's a reason we moved out here. So
Yes.
let's remember that. Like you can
Yes.
still be who you are. Just remember that these people know how to run a state and they're doing a
Yep.
pretty damn good job. So that's what I try to
Exactly.
do. But all
Yeah.
right, ma'am. I will let you go. And again, I appreciate you being on.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Yes, ma'am.